This meeting of the Community Development Board is called to order on October 19th, 2021. Welcome, everyone. This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the City Council and serve voluntarily. I am Mary Lau, and I will ask the other members and the staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Brian Barker.
Andy Park.
Jay Daniel, attorney for the board.
Assistant City Attorney Matthew Middage.
Gordon Behar.
Mike Flannery. John Quattrocki.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so that we might hear all of the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us, clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Now I will ask those in attendance who plan to speak to please rise and be sworn in by the clerk.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give us the entire truth? I do. Thank you.
My apologies to everyone. I somehow skipped over the Pledge of Allegiance, so please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agendas of today's meeting are on the podium to your left near the entry door. Also on this podium are a roster of the Community Development Board, the list of city staff experts and their resumes, the board's rules of procedure, and the annual schedule of this board. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last month's meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Our next order of business is for citizens to be heard regarding items that are not on today's agenda. Is there anyone present that would like to speak on a subject that is not on today's agenda? Please come forward or raise your hand. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I am Bill Johnson, 2694 Redford Court, West in Clearwater. And I've been around this board and this process for a long time, but there's so much that I learn at each time, and I think it is essentially kind of confusing to the average citizens in the community. So let me share something about the experience following last month's meeting on the 850 Bayway. And in that process, the applicant made some closing statements, which I think were perhaps at variance with some facts. And I'm passing this around. This has the applicant's closing statement. One of the statements was, because the City Council approved the conceptual plan. I think that was a reference to the 2019 approval of the density allocation. And I thought that was kind of strange because when this got started, it was always that there would be subject to the full final approval of the project on a level 2. So I went back and I looked at the agenda for the meeting in 2009, which is the second document there. And you can see that there is several references subject to meeting the applicable flexibility criteria of the Community Development Code. Again, subject to meeting the applicable flexibility criteria of the Community Development Code. And then finally, subject to meeting the applicable flexibility criteria of the CDB, and as approved as part of a level 2 flexible development application. So I don't think that the average citizen really understands the process, how the fact that some of these questions could be challenged who should be challenging them, and the process goes pretty fast at the time that the citizen gets started with it. There's also a reference in here to the lay testimony is not competent substantial evidence. That really is not covered in your CDB Citizens Guide. And that is really pretty important to the process. And if the average citizens don't have a chance to make a difference, then they're kind of wasting your time and their time as well. So I'd like you to review this process. Thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you.
Were there enough copies?
Is there anyone else present who would like to speak regarding something that's not on today's agenda? If not, we will move ahead to our consent agenda. This board has adopted a consent agenda format, and the consent items are identified as such on the agenda. Consent agenda items are those items for which the Planning and Development Department recommends approval. The applicant is in agreement with any proposed conditions, and no written objections to the case have been received to date. Items may be removed from the consent agenda today by a member of the board, a member of the staff, or any person in the audience for questions or objections. I will read each item on the consent agenda, and if any person wishes to remove this item from the consent agenda, please so state or raise your hand, and we will remove it from the consent agenda. Items removed from the consent agenda will be heard in the regular order of the meeting. Items that remain on the consent agenda will be approved with a single vote. Today we have 2 level 2 items and 1 level 3 item on our consent agenda. The first item is case FLD 2021-07015/TDR 2021-08004, TDR 2021-08005. The location is 619, 629, 631, and 635 Mandalay. The owner is Bayway Florida Hotel LLC. The representative is Brian Ongst of McFarland Ferguson. The location is, again, the address is square foot 50 slip dock in the tourist district and marina character district of Beach by Design for the property at 455 East Shore. Is there anyone who would like to remove this item from today's consent agenda? All right, that item will be removed from today's consent agenda. The next item is a level 3 application, TA 2020-03003, proposed amendments to the Community Development Code. This board is tasked with making a recommendation to the City Council. We are reviewing a request to amend the City of Clearwater's Community Development Code, the Floodplain Management Ordinance, to allow for the use of best available data when establishing flood hazard areas, including Pinellas County's Vulnerability Assessment 2021, to address accessory structures for parking and storage, to modify provisions for manufactured homes, to modify or delete various definitions, and make administrative amendments, and is making a recommendation to the City Council. Is there anyone present that would like to remove this level 3 item from today's agenda? All right. We would need to make a motion for the level 2 and a separate motion for the level 3.
Because you have one,
Yeah.
Mr. Bayard.
Right. But I believe we only have one item left, one level 2 item left on the consent agenda.
So 2 motions, you're right.
Okay. Would someone like to make an amendment for?
I'll do it.
All
I'll
right.
move to approve item number 1, case FLD 2021-07015. On today's consent agenda, based on evidence in the record, including the application, the staff report, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with conditions as listed.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item number 1 is approved. And if I could have a motion for the level 3 item.
I'll do it.
Thank you,
I'll
John.
move to approve item number 3, TA 2020-03003. On today's consent agenda, based on evidence in the record, including the application and the staff report, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law as stated in the staff reports with conditions of approval as listed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 3 is approved to make a recommendation to the city council. All right, Mr. Daniel, do I proceed in regular order with the listed item and then the one that was removed from consent second?
Your item that was removed from the consent agenda will go first.
All right. We'll now move on to our regular agenda. Today, both of the cases that we'll be hearing are quasi-judicial proceedings. A quasi-judicial hearing is a level 2 case, such as flexible development. They're considered quasi-judicial hearings. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the Community Development Board reviews the application, the staff report, correspondence, and all evidence presented today and makes a final decision subject to appeal. This board has previously qualified all of the city staff who will testify as experts in their area of professional training, education, and experience. The list of city staff experts and their resumes are in the handbook on the podium near the entry door. Any other professionals who desire to be qualified as an expert witness shall so request at the beginning of the case and present a resume to each board member. The board shall determine whether or not to qualify the person as an expert and in what field of study. At the beginning of each level 2 case, I will ask for anyone who wishes party status to come forward and state your reasons. Party status may be granted if the person requesting such status demonstrates that he's a substantially affected person. The board will then determine whether or not to grant party status, and then the case will proceed as follows. After request for party status, presentation by planning and development staff, 10 minutes maximum. Presentation by the applicant, 10 minutes maximum. Presentation by persons with party status, 5 minutes per party maximum. Cross-examination of witnesses by planning and development staff. Cross-examination of witnesses by the applicant. Cross-examination of witnesses by persons with party status. Comments by the public, 3 minutes per person. Closing remarks by the planning and development staff, 3 minutes maximum. Closing remarks by persons granted party status, 3 minutes maximum. Closing remarks by the applicant, 3 minutes maximum. Closing of the public hearing, discussion, and vote by the board. Our first level 2 case on regular agenda is the item removed from the consent agenda earlier, case FLD 2009-02009, a request to modify a condition of a previously approved dock, and planning and development.
Madam Chair, at this time, I would ask that you accept Senior Planner Mark Perry as an expert in redevelopment planning, comprehensive planning, annexation, implementation, zoning land use, rezoning applications, land development, general planning code amendments, landscape ordinances, special area plans and overlay districts, and all other matters he is about to testify on.
Is there a motion to
Move to
accept?
accept Mark Perry as an expert.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Perry.
Okay, thank you. The request before you is to reconsider one condition of approval of FLD 2009-02009.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment. Thank you, Pat. We need to have a request for party status before we get started
Oh,
with the,
sorry, you're exactly right.
and thanks to our clerk for pointing that out.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to request party status before we begin with the presentations? Please come forward and state your name and spell it for the clerk.
Madam Chairman, my name is William Day, D-A-Y, like night and day. I live directly next door to the marina in question at 473 East Shore Drive.
All right.
Move to grant party status.
All right. Is there-
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is there anyone else present that wishes to request party status for this item? All right, Mr. Perry.
Okay. as I was saying, that approved flexible development application from 2009, that approved a 50-slip dock on the approved property. The property has been subject to several other approvals, and right now it's currently approved for a 139-unit hotel. It includes a public boardwalk and that 50-slip dock. The original approval called for 32 of those slips to be considered a marina facility, with the remaining 18 as being an accessory commercial dock. And as we know from previous applications, the main difference between the two is that a marina facility, those slips can be leased or sold or rented out to just about anybody. A commercial dock is accessory to the primary use. So 18 slips, commercial dock for the hotel, so those would only be for hotel guests. Currently, the site is nearly completed. The dock is built pretty much. The hotel is almost complete. This hotel also includes the very first component of the publicly accessible boardwalk that is really a main point of the Marina District of Beach by Design. This slide shows the layout of the docks. The ones highlighted are at the south end of the site, and the goal is, or the applicant's intent is to be able to use those for limited commercial uses. The original condition of FLD 2009, condition 5, it really limited the types of uses that can go in the marina facility component. What the applicant is looking to do is be able to provide slips for captained charter boats, as well as guided jet ski rental tours. The exact request is essentially to strike out condition 5 and replace it with the details before you, basically as I just went over. City staff has reviewed the request for reconsideration and does recommend approval. With me today, I do have Ed Chesney. He is the Marine and Aviation Director. I'd like to have him just come up briefly and introduce himself in case there are any questions regarding the slips or the dock.
Madam Chair, at this time, I would ask that you accept Marine and Aviation Director Ed Chesney as an expert in environmental engineering, water quality, natural resources, contamination assessment, hazardous waste, coastal engineering, marine and dredging operations, and all other matters he's about to testify on.
Do we have a resume, Mr. Chesney?
I have him on the list here, so there should be one here. I can take a look and
I'll move, I know Ed for years, so I'll move to accept him as an expert. I've seen his resume, I think it's in the packet.
Is there a second?
I've known Ed for probably longer than that, so there. I'll second.
Second.
All right,
I'm seconding.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Well, with that, if there are any questions, I'd like to try to answer them.
Quick question for you. Is there a limitation on how many could have been of these 32 used for commercial purposes? I mean, I see that it's 8, it's 25%, but is that the maximum allowed? Could they have requested all 32?
Well, theoretically, they could have requested all of them, but
They could, theoretically, yeah.
theoretically, yeah, there's no magic number in the code, if that's what you're asking, like how many could they have asked for? Eight was something that they decided was appropriate, and staff does agree.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, I do have a copy of Mr. Chesney's resume here if anybody would like to take a look at it.
I think we're good now. I think we're past that. Thanks. Appreciate it, though.
Can you go over what is adjacent to this property? I mean, I could understand somebody living and not wanting these boats coming in and out and in and out all the time, as opposed to a normal house in some, or a unit where you take them out once a month.
Yeah, the site itself is located at the northeast corner of Papaya and East Shore. So on the south side is essentially the Papaya Street right-of-way that kind of dead ends into the water. Uses going further south include Frenchie's, I believe, has motel apartments, and then they have some of their fishing operations a little further south of that. I believe that further, and again, that's on the waterfront side, so those would be the properties most affected. Going further south, if my memory serves correctly, you've got a series of small motels. Heading north, I'm not 100% sure what's adjacent to the north of this site. I believe there's small motels, but I could be wrong on that.
I'm mostly concerned about the side where the boats are going in and out all the time.
Right, it will be on the south side, so we are dictating exactly which slips may be utilized. So the idea is to consolidate and put them on the south side, which is really not adjacent to another property per se. So,
Like the south side is at the edge of the entry gateway city boardwalk piece, right?
exactly right, yeah.
And that area is all tourist zoning, correct?
Correct. The entire area is zone tourist. It is all comfortably within the Beach by Design planning area. It's within the Marina District of Beach by Design.
Right, any other questions?
Was there anything in particular, or why the city changed their position on allowing it, or was the original condition just a standard condition that the city?
Yes, actually, that's a pretty good question. When the dock was originally approved, it was approved as accessory to attached dwellings. So the city felt that having any kind of commercial use coming out of that property would be inappropriate, outside of just, regular folks keeping their boats there. The use, as we can see, the use was changed from approved attached dwellings to now overnight accommodations. So effectively, the site basically became a commercially used site. So staff basically felt, well, it's not unreasonable to have a limited number of limited use commercial slips. I should also point out that marinas and marina facilities are really something specifically called out in Beach by Design as something that is a goal of the cities to support. It recognizes marinas and marina facilities as sort of an important key use out on the beach. It's also something that's listed in the comprehensive plan as something that the city should support when appropriate uses arise. And as a limited use in this case, it does seem appropriate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we'll have a presentation by the applicant.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. Brian Ungst, 625 Court Street, on behalf of the applicant NESC LLC. Mr. Perry did a great job recapping the proposal. This is the first step of the process. We also have a contemporaneously filed application to amend the development agreement. The development agreement actually incorporates the 2010 development order for the marina, and so we need to amend that, which would replace that exhibit with, if you approve it today, with the development order that's approved today. So this will also be going to the City Council for their consideration. And I think that Mr. Perry covered the original condition, number 5, regarding no commercial uses by the tenants. That was a 2009 application prior to the 2012 hotel application, which has subsequently been amended twice. And now you've got the hotel that exists, and the certificate of occupancy is, my understanding, is a couple weeks away from being issued. We did receive a lot of input from Mr. Chesney, who helped us develop what he felt was an appropriate restricted commercial use of those 8 docks. So it is very, very restricted in terms of what those uses are. And we also had input from Mr. Day, who obviously you will hear from in a moment, who requested that those slips be limited to the southernmost slips. And those are the slips that are the farthest away from his property. And just for your benefit, Mr. Flannery, I do have some pictures here. This depicts, there we go. This depicts the slips in question, the southernmost slips. This is the Papaya public right-of-way that the city invested significantly in, and then this is the public boardwalk that my client is dedicating. And then if you look to the north, you will see that there is an existing marina directly adjacent to us to the north, so this is consistent with the immediate surrounding uses. And obviously, we feel like a public boardwalk would benefit from having a public use in that marina. It would obviously incentivize people to come down, use the boardwalk, and really fulfills the intent of the East Shore Marina District. And with that, I'll answer any questions you have. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. The board has granted party status to William Day. The granting of party status entitles you to these additional rights: to personally testify, present evidence by documentary submittal, present witnesses, conduct cross-examination of any witness, present argument, and appeal the decision of the board to a hearing officer and/or to circuit court. Mr. Day?
Gentlemen, I'm certainly honored with all that authority that you've given me. I just have a couple of simple questions. I live directly next door to this marina. I was here 12 years ago when it was first applied for as a marina. There was no hotel involved. There was no boardwalk. There was none of that. It was going to be a 50-slip marina. First up, I'm a strong advocate of the Marina District. I have no problem with this request as it's presented. My concern is that there are always administrative changes that are made afterwards. I would like it to be clear, I would like the board to make it clear that when this is approved, these 8 slips are approved for that given area. Not to be moved around, not to be jumped around, not to be added on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's my major concern. If you can assure me that those slips will be the slips that are going to be used commercially, I don't have a problem.
Mr. Daniel, we could incorporate in any approval we give a condition to that effect?
Yeah, I believe it's drafted that way, but you can certainly emphasize that condition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's drafted that way. There were a lot of other drafts that were done when this hotel was developed and so forth, and there were a lot of administrative changes made thereafter. That's the only thing I don't want to happen with this. You know, when this is changed, fine, no problem. But that's it, you know, unless there's another public hearing.
All right.
No administrative changes. Is that fair?
Are you saying you're okay with the way it's drafted now?
Yeah, yeah. As long as it's, you know, we have some assurance that it's not going to be able to be changed. That's my only concern.
And I appreciate that, but I don't believe this board can grant any assurances beyond its present authority, which is to review and consider this application as it's stated. I understand where you're going.
Well, the board can certainly approve it with conditions.
Right, the condition,
Is that
the condition that you're asking for is, they can approve conditions that are within their authority. So this board has no authority to, for example, fetter the administrative discretion of the city staff, assuming there is any. I don't know if there is or not. I don't know if there is or not. But even if there were, that's beyond this board's authority to fetter that discretion.
Okay,
Because it's conferred by code.
Okay.
let me just ask this. The board does have the authority to approve it for those given slips. Is that correct, sir?
They have the ability to approve it as it's presented to them. You can amend it within the scope of your authority.
As long as we all hear it, you know, now, I'll have no problem living with it.
And there's a record, of course, of today's proceeding. There is a record of today's proceeding.
That's what I want. That's why I wanted party status.
All right.
So otherwise, I wish them well. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Any cross-examination by planning staff? Mr. Perry? No. All right. Any cross-examination by the applicant? No, thank you. All right. Mr. Day, anything you'd like to ask any of the previous witnesses?
Yes.
No, thank you.
All right. And I think anybody present in the public that would like to make comments? All right. Closing comments?
I did want to, if you wanted to clarify. Gina, you have no microphone there.
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I just wanted to point out that the condition actually references the southern slip, so it's very specific. So while staff may have some limited abilities to make minor amendments, that would not be one that I would be authorized to make. So I wanted to assure you that the condition was very specific, and I would not have that authority to amend it administratively.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you. Ms. Clayton, I'm going to take that as your closing comments for the planning staff. Mr. Hans?
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, and echoing what Ms. Clayton stated, we specifically drafted this condition of approval to address Mr. Day's concerns, and they're limited to the southernmost marina slips as depicted on the approved site plan, which if you approve this, the approved site plan will be here. So the condition is very, very specific about each and every marina slip that would be allowed for the restricted commercial uses. Conditions of approval cannot be administratively changed. A condition of approval, to change it, we have to come back to the Community Development Board, which is exactly why we're here for this item. So there is no ability or concern of any administrative changes without further input from this board and the public. Thank you.
Right. And our approval would incorporate the existing condition as drafted. We don't have to add a condition.
Yes, ma'am. It's drafted very specifically, and this was in response to Mr. Day's concern. And as I understand, Mr. Chesney's fine with it, and so is the planning staff. Thank you.
Any closing comments, Mr. Day?
I'm very happy with the condition.
All right.
Great. I move to approve case number FLD 2009-02009 based on the evidence and testimony presented in the application, the staff report, and today's hearing, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with the conditions of approval as listed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 2 on the original consent agenda is approved.
Yeah, why don't we do this?
All right, I believe we're ready to move to our final level 2 item on today's agenda, case FLD 2021-04010, 211 and 221 Skiff Point. The owner is Skiff Point DP1 LLC. The applicant representative is John Bodziak of John Bodziak Architects. The location is again 211 and 221 Skiff Point, 0.421 acres located on the south side of Skiff Point, approximately 206 feet from the Larboard Way and Skiff Point intersection. The Community Development Board is reviewing a request to construct 12 attached dwelling units in the medium-high density residential island estates neighborhood conservation overlay district for the property located at the addresses I'm just listed. The project is 50 feet in height, provides 25 off-street parking spaces, and requests allowable flexibility to lot width, building height, setbacks, and landscape requirements, as well as a 952 square foot dock. The dock is 112 feet in width and approximately 80 feet in length, and requests allowable flexibility for square footage of a commercial dock greater than 500 square feet in deck area, pursuant to Community Development Code Sections 3-601.C.3, 3-1202.G, and Section 2-404F. All right. Are there any people in attendance today who would like to request party status for this item? If you come forward one at a time and state your name and why you think you're entitled to party status, and please provide your address and your and spell your name for the clerk.
My name is Joseph Wink. I live at W-I-N-K. I live at 400 Larboard Way, Unit 105, Clearwater 33767. I received a notice of this meeting and I live directly in front of it.
Right. Do we have a motion to grant party status?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
My name is Audrey Cornu. I live at, spelled C-O-R-N-U. I live at 354 Larboard Way, Clearwater Beach, Florida, 33767. And we live in the same waterway as this new proposed development, the docks.
Did you receive notice of today's meeting?
We did not get notice, and that will be brought up by somebody else concerning that as well.
Right. Is there any discussion by the board or a motion to grant party status?
I move we grant party status.
Second.
Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Sorry. My name is Marion Goodman. I live at 200 Skiff Point, Majestic Point, Unit 404. And we
Can
are
you spell your name?
MarianGoodman. And we are objecting to the development of the dock immediately adjacent to our property.
Is there a motion to grant party status?
Did you receive notice
Of this meeting?
of the, of the project?
Yes, sir.
Right.
I move.
All right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Dawson, S-T-E-P-H-A-N-Y. Dawson, D-A-W-S-O-N. I live at 246 Dolphin Point. It's on the waterway, directly across, directly affected. However, did not receive notice, despite the fact I really think we should have.
So, real quick question is there a limitation on distance, or what establishes party status or notice specifically?
I'm on the waterway.
Yeah,
I live
sorry,
directly across. I know, but
I was just
I'm
asking our attorney.
I'm giving him more information so that he can better answer.
Thank you.
Substantially affected typically means that the person is going to be affected either in kind or degree in a different way than is the general public by the board's action on the application.
Okay, thanks. Great. So moved, if there's a motion.
All in
I'm sorry,
favor?
who made the motion?
Jordan.
Okay, thank you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Hello, Madam Chairman, hello, Board. My name is Paul Gotchis, spelled G-A-T-C-H-I-S. I reside at 360 Larboard Way. I did not receive notice. I'm here to oppose, of course, the extended dock into the
Could I get you
Cove
to
area.
spell your last name for me again?
G-A-T-C-H-I-S.
Did you receive notice of the meeting?
No, I did not.
All right. But you're on the waterway.
I am on the waterway.
All right.
I'm part of Dolphin Landing. There's 6 units, townhouses. We're basically on the curve at the back end.
Right. Is there,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Pfiffner. It's P-F-I-F-F-N-E-R. We own at number 107, 400 Larboard Way, sharing the same waterway with the proposed project.
Did you receive notice of today's meeting?
I received notice of this meeting, but not the first one.
All right. Any,
I move.
all right.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Board. My name is Keith Bisek. My wife, Lacey Bisek, she is not here. We live at 231 Skiff.
Spell your name, please.
Bisek, B as in boy, I-S-I-G as in golf.
Thank you.
We live at 231 Skiff Point, unit number 6, which is right next to the lot and the dock. and here to oppose the dock and just some other questions. And I was notified.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wes Taggart. That's Wes-Taggart. I reside at 244 Dolphin Point. It's part of the waterway, and I did not receive notice of the meeting.
But you are directly on the waterfront?
Yes.
All right.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
you. Are there any other people wishing to ask for party status? All right. Again, as I said earlier in the meeting, we have now granted party status to Joseph Wink, Audrey Cornu, Marion Goodman, Stephanie Dawson, Paul Gotches, Mary Piffner, Keith Bizek, and Wes Taggart, and I apologize if I butchered any of those names. The granting of party status entitles you to these additional rights to personally testify, present evidence by documentary submittal, present witnesses, conduct cross-examination of any witness, present argument, and appeal the decision of the board to a hearing officer and/or a circuit court. With that, we will begin with the presentation by planning staff.
Good afternoon, Mark Perry, Planning and Development. The 0.421 acre site is located on the south side of Skiff Point. It's about 200 feet from Larboard and Skiff Point intersections. It consists currently of 2 parcels. The site is located in the medium high density residential zoning district and the residential high. We can get the PowerPoint up and running.
Sorry.
Sorry. Never sure who I'm supposed to talk to on that. Thanks. It's in the residential high future land use category. It is in the Island Estates Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. Just a point on that, though, that overlay district really only has special rules pertaining to properties that are zoned LMDR, low medium density residential. Any other zoning district pretty much just defaults back to basic code. So this is a matter of point. There's a little bit of history. I'm going to very briefly hit that history. There have been 2 prior FLD applications, one in 2005, one in 2013, that have been approved for this subject site. One thing they all have in common with this current application is that they were all for attached dwellings. They were all for 12 dwelling units, and they all included a height of about 50 feet. The first one was 47 feet, the second one was approved for 50, and this one is also coming in for 50. The current application has a reduction in setback on the front to 18 feet, and there are setback reductions as well on the rear to pool and patio. The building itself is maintaining its required setback. All of the required parking will be accommodated on the first floor of the building. One other component of the application that does also require review by the Community Development Board, in addition to the height and the aforementioned setback requests, is the fact that the project also includes a 952 square foot dock. This is considered a commercial dock because, and it also requires review by the Community Development Board, because any dock serving, say, attached dwellings that's over 500 square feet is automatically considered a commercial dock, and all commercial docks are required to be reviewed by the Community Development Board. If they were able to come in at 499 feet, they wouldn't necessarily have to come here for that component. With that said, the other component that they do have to ask for reductions for is the lot width. There's nothing obviously they can do to enlarge the size of the site. The dock is proposed to be 80 feet in length, 112 feet in width, and it will include side setbacks of approximately 50 feet. None of those components require any flexibility. The length, as required by code, is dictated to be a maximum of 75 feet of the width of the property, which would be about 142 feet. Same thing for the width. So 142 feet in width is permitted where they're proposing 112. Setbacks are required at 10% of the property width at the water, which would be about 19 feet on each side. They're proposing about 50 feet on each side. Before I finish up, I would like to introduce two other staff members in case there are questions for them. First would be Ed Chesney. He's with Marine and Aviation. And the second person I'll call up just to introduce themselves briefly is Sarah Kessler with Environmental Engineering. Ed, would you mind? Okay, we'll do it reversed.
Madam Chair, at this time I would ask that you accept Environmental Specialist Sarah Kessler as an expert in the fields of environmental engineering, water quality, and natural resources, and all other matters she's about to testify on.
Right.
So moved.
Second. All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
You need me again?
You can just say hello.
I'm back again.
Are there questions for Mr. Perry from the board or any of his staff members?
So what I'll do to just briefly finish up is to just note that this case did go before the Development Review Committee on July 1st, and it was found to be legally sufficient to move forward to the Community Development Board. Staff did find that the proposal does meet the requirements of section CDC section 1-103, which is the general purpose and intent of the code. It's also consistent with CDC sections 2-404F, which are the specific use criteria for residential infill, as well as table 2-404. Those are the flexible development standards. It's also consistent with 3-914A, which are the general standards for level 1 and 2 approvals. It's consistent with the general landscaping standards of Section 3, Division 12. It's consistent with applicable components of the city's comprehensive plan. It's also consistent with the applicable components of the Community Development Code dealing with docks, specifically Section 3-601. With that, the Planning and Development Department does make a recommendation of approval of application FLD 2021-04010, subject to a series of conditions. Most of them are sort of standard conditions. I would point out that finishing touches on the landscape plan still need to be worked out with staff. So condition 9 does speak to that specifically. If there are any specific questions, I can try to answer them.
You know, you may or may not, how this proposal is different than the previous two that have been approved? I mean, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, it's not very different. I know that I processed the one in 2013, and it's, you know, some of the stylistics, you know, the architectural stylings are a little different, but overall they're very similar projects. I mean, realistically speaking, when you have a site of a certain size that's kind of an odd shape, it's, you know, narrower in the front, to get that on there, you're kind of limited to how the building is going to shift around.
The 2013 approval process, that project included a substantial sized dock, maybe not identical configuration to this one, but I recall it was a pretty substantial dock.
I believe, yeah, there has been a dock approved similar to, I mean, this really is, the whole project in and of itself is very similar to what has been presented to the Community Development Board prior and has been approved, so it's very similar.
Let me really clarify. You mean this board, we've seen this big of a dock?
I don't recall the exact size of the prior dock. It was pretty similar. Apparently it was 835 square feet, so, and this one was 900 and, well, 900 and something.
952.
52, thank you. So, yeah, so about 100 square feet more.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Ms. Perry, your staff report indicates that the harbor master has reviewed the proposal and found it to be acceptable, and you mentioned that dock permits are ultimately issued by Pinellas County Water and Navigation.
Correct.
Given the nature of the objections that we've received so far, could you just address those two? Who has which role?
That's a really good question. In Pinellas County, and this is to the best of my knowledge, but it's certainly how it works in Clearwater, but I think it's countywide. The Pinellas County Water Navigation physically issues permits, but they do require that local zoning authorities sign off for zoning. Perfect. You left me so long.
Ed Chesney, Marine and Aviation. This, and what Mark had said is correct. This is an unusual case based on the site. It does meet code, so if you ask me, can we support it, it does meet code. And I believe the county could permit it. They'll have to look at it for other things too, as far as boat traffic and obstruction to the waterway. When I first saw this, I wondered why it was so far out. And the reason it's so far out is they're trying to maximize the number of slips for the development. So I get that. But it doesn't really fit with the rest of the newer developments there. A lot of the stuff internally where some of the people came up, they live at the end of the thing. And I'd like to put up an aerial if I could. It's hard to talk off of that because you don't see what's really... So you can see now how there's a 19-foot boardwalk and then another 5-foot wide dock. So it really pushes that thing like 24 feet off the seawall before the slips begin. And if I could put this here, and if it will turn on, I don't know, do I have to push anything? Oh, okay.
Different one, hold on.
So where we're talking about is the site right there. So you can see the development here. This is Majestic Point. That's a newer development with a bunch of slips that surround it. And then across the way here is another newer development with a bunch of slips, all on the curve. All of these points are curved. So they maximized the number of slips they could get. This one is pretty much right on the seawall. This one looks like it's about 10 or 13 feet off of the seawall. And then this new one we're looking at now projects even further than that, another 10 feet, and they're bigger slips. So it pushes it out 80 feet into the waterway. Most of the slips internal here are residential slips that are just your basic single-family slip. It's right on the waterway. Boat sizes, I think there's two 50-foot slips in there. The other ones are 35 type, normal size slips. So when you look at this, I talked to the developer and I said, well, it really doesn't fit the look of the neighborhood because everything is on the curvature of the seawall, not projected off. Because this would send it out into the waterway. It would have site visibility issues, I think, potential conflicts for traffic coming in and out of the waterway there for the residents. However, it does meet all of the code requirements, and that's what the county will look at as well. But the county will want us, the city, to sign off on it first before they will even review the application. So that's your job now, is to look at this because we're going to have to sign off on whatever is decided here today. Personally, if I was recommending something to the applicant, which I did, I asked him, could you go for a variance on your setbacks and get more seawall frontage, and then that would push the marina up to the seawall. They want to maximize the amount of slips, but they're leaving these gaps here and here. If we gave them flexibility to go to their property line, they could get the number of slips they want and build them on the seawall, and it would look in harmony with the rest of the waterway there and not project out. So that was my interpretation of it, and I presented that to the applicant. They were amenable to it. I won't speak on their behalf, but that is one option. Another option is for you to approve it as is, and then sign off on, we would sign off on the county permit, and it would exist as it is proposed. But personally, there's a lot of development pressure on this area. New docks are coming in, new developments are coming in. When some of these older sites get redeveloped, we're gonna see them wanna maximize the length of the waterway. That's what allows them to push these docks out further. The fact that they're not all out further means they didn't maximize their rights. So somebody new could come in, combine some properties, and we could look at the same thing again and have another dock project out. I like the idea of keeping them similar in nature. The last two developments, Majestic and then the Dolphin Point one, are very similar, and this one could look similar to that too, if we found a way for the applicant to accept that. So if you had any other questions, that's kind of where I am.
The suggestion that you made for decreasing the setback from the seawall, is the code consistent with doing that sort of thing?
Well, there is no code off the seawall. It would be the side setbacks. So right now, they're working within their side setbacks. So the property owners on each side of them would have to agree to reduce the setbacks, to allow them to come closer to the property line, and then that would pull the dock in keeping with the same amount of docks that they want. If we didn't do that, they would lose probably 4 docks. If we had them pull it in and just keep all setbacks.
At my place, I have a 35-foot approved. I can have a dock 35 feet long. My neighbor put one in 45 feet, asked for a variance, which at this point I'm not too happy with because I now have a 40-foot boat sitting there and losing half my view. But that's my problem. Is there a variance required to go out beyond 35 feet from this point?
For this project?
This project?
No.
There's no variance limitation.
It's all based on the width of the waterway. So they actually could go out further if they wanted to, because it's that wide.
They don't have to request a variance.
They do not have to request a variance. Now they're asking for a dock of 952 square feet, but I don't think you could have any multi-use dock that does not get that variance. So that's, when I look at those other 2 docks, they both got that, and it's not a variance, it's just a flexibility standard. So Majestic Point also received to build their dock, and is greater than this deck, and so did the other one to the south there. So I don't really feel that is an issue that would keep this dock from being built. But again, it's up to the Community Development Board, I think, in my opinion, that I'll give you my recommendations. I think there are some conflicts with boat traffic in the area, could be potential conflicts, but I think they're easily resolved, and I think if the applicant and the neighbors work together, they probably could get something they both would agree to.
Do we know what the distance is between in that little inlet there from one seawall to the other?
I think it's over 300 feet, or near 300 feet, because they could go like 140 some feet there. But now this has not been submitted to the county. I've checked on that, so that's, the county has to approve this too. They ultimately approve it, but if it were in the county, there would be no problem for them approving this dock. The fact that it's in the city, and we have the Community Development Board that reviews them, we have to give them our recommendation. So that's the point where we are now.
I heard in the staff presentation that the side setbacks they're proposing are greater than required.
Yes.
How, and theirs are at 50 feet. It's, what is it, 10% of the seawall width?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is in this case.
The required setbacks are 10% of the width of the property at the waterfront. And I believe the property is about 190 feet wide, so that would be 19-foot side setbacks, east and west. And they're proposing, I think, 52 on one side and 54 on the other.
And again, that's to pull the marina out so they could get boats that would park sideways. But if the marina were to, follow the seawall and we gave them setback variances east and west, then all of the boats would pull in at the same angle. We wouldn't have side, different configurations there. It would look more consistent with what's out there now. But again, that's something that, we would have to come back with a variance.
And you think with the variance they would lose, or without the variance they would lose 4 slips?
Yes.
With the variance?
With the variance, they could probably gain all of their slips, but I can't say that because I haven't seen the geometry and everything.
But they would need the adjacent homeowners association to sign off.
To sign off on it,
Which I'm
yes.
sure could be difficult.
For the county as well.
On a commercial dock, if there's any flexibility being requested, in this case, there is no flexibility being requested. The only reason that you need to review it right now is because of the area. It's not a flexibility part, but setbacks, length, width, they all meet code. If they want to reduce a setback or extend the length or extend the width or whatever it is, if they want to do any of that, that's a request for flexibility that must come back to this board. So there's no, the only time that you could have the neighbors sign off on something of flexibility is for 1 and 2 family homes that have a dock. That's it. Any flexibility from the otherwise required development parameters will definitely be reviewed by this board,
I
absolutely.
think what Ed was referring to is Pinellas County.
Pinellas County will require the neighbors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Got it. So it can be done, there's hoops.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we'll have a presentation by the
Sorry,
applicant.
one real quick question. It looks like the slips are slightly varying in size. Is there any maximums or limit or minimums or anything that dictates slip size? Or is it just simply as desired by developer owner?
It's now user, boats are getting bigger and wider, so if I were, to say, I'm seeing applications all the time, they're 50-foot slips. Nobody's really doing many more, 30, 40, and 50-foot slips are quite common.
What about width? What's common width?
And I don't think any of these had lifts in them, but the widths are probably like 15 feet, 16 feet wide, 18. It depends on the vessel. But I didn't look that closely on width, how wide they all were. I think they were 16 or 18.
Appeared to be about 15 to 18.
Okay.
15 sort of on the smaller and kind of 18 on the slightly bigger, appears to be. And you would say that's common?
That's very common, and especially in this area. And there's good water depth here, so you'll get these bigger boats that'll want to be here. People will buy there because of the slips, or not buy there because of the slip.
The previous application that was approved in 2013, was that approved purely on in terms of the dock on a square footage calculation, or was a layout actually approved in 2013?
I can't speak to that. I wasn't here for that.
I'm sorry, Gina.
Yeah, that prior dock from 2013 at 835 square feet would have had to have been approved by this board because it was over 500 square feet. So no matter what, that dock, nothing else withstanding, would have come to this board.
And the layout would have been with.
I guess my question is, was it purely based on square footage, or was there a layout that was approved?
I don't recall, let me see.
There would have had to have been a layout to get that square footage.
Is that something that's easily looked at?
No, it is actually, I'm looking at it right now. I don't see any, I don't see anything in that 2013 agenda item that hints at any kind of flexibility for setback or length. I think it was merely because it was over 500 square feet. It was 114 feet in width, where this one is 112. It was about 70 feet in length, where this one is 80.
Do you have a layout of that there?
No, I'm literally just looking at the old agenda. Setbacks of 63 and 54 feet. So, big picture is probably a very similar layout. Just judging on what their proposed setbacks length.
If that's something the board wants to take a look at, we could find a way to get that to you at a later point.
Any other questions before we have the applicant make a presentation? All right, we'll hear from the applicant.
I'm Jack Boziak, I'm the architect. I happen to have been involved in both of the prior approvals, one of which was collapsed when the economy went down in '08, and the other one was in the dispute between ownership. I wish I could have gotten up earlier and avoided a lot of the conversation that went on, because I did have an earlier conversation with Ed Chesney, and I do understand the concerns. But let me give you a reason as to why it wound up the way it was. When we originally came in to put these docks in with the prior approval, we were told we had to, at that time, stay 15 or 20 feet off of the seawall with an arm to go out to the docks, and that's what spread everything out. It wasn't that we particularly wanted to do it that way, or they weren't going to. At that time, there was some concern there may be seagrass there, and in conversation with Ed, he didn't believe that was any issue, that we could come in with a very similar layout to what you see on the adjacent properties. And the owners of the property are not the kind of guys that want to come in and fight this and be, we do understand the concerns of the people that have objected, but I wanted to I would have gotten up earlier and put to rest the fact from my conversations with Ed that we'd be glad to redesign it with, hopefully with some cooperation from the adjacent neighbors, and do a very similar layout that pulls the docks back up to this, closer to the seawall, and lines them along the curve of 190 feet with a little bit more moderate setback maybe on the side, not property line to property line. So we were very much in tune with Ed on trying to accomplish this, but please realize that in the prior two reviews, we were told to get the docks off of the seawall because there was some concern that we might run into a seagrass issue that might negate us from being able to go by the seawall. But apparently there were two docks there that you see in the pictures and surveys that were two individual docks that were now, and they're still there. The remains of them are still there. But I've discussed it with the developer, and we have no problem with proposing a redesign that allows us, with some cooperation from the neighbors, to curve it along or pull it back from where it is. So I wanted to allay that fear, and I know that people here have a lot of concern. Somewhat is I do understand their concerns, but we did, when we began this project for this design review and the previous ones, you're given the rules of what you've got to do. And when the one originally was that we had to come off the seawall, unfortunately that's what generated this design. And the unusual shape of the property, it's a pie shape, so it kind of sends everything out in that direction, and that's what made it even worse, because our property lines aren't perpendicular to the site, they're like a pie shape too, and that's what created this unusually shaped dock that reaches out further than probably is desirable to the adjacent neighbors and the neighborhood. So with that being said, in discussion with the developer, we'll be glad to entertain coming back in and redesigning the docks. They're a separate permit approval, and we don't have any problem with that, and I wish I could have gotten up and maybe allayed some of the fears of the people and the board, but that is where we are on this, we would be willing to go ahead and entertain or work with Ed on a redesign. I spoke to him earlier, as I said, and we don't have any problem with that. Okay. Hate to see everybody concerned about it so much.
Are you asking for that at this point?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Continue the application?
Well, I'm not continuing that. The dock is a separate permit, so we would like to have the approval with the condition of it being the redesign of the dock, which is a separate application. We'd like to move on with the development of the property, and, you know, we will work with the staff on coming up with a reasonable solution.
Is that something we're able to do?
I'm sorry?
Is that something we're able to do?
I'd like staff to weigh in on that.
Seems like it's a single application right now, it seems like.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I think that if you were inclined to move the building forward absent the docks and then have them come back with an amendment to their application, we could accomplish that if you wanted to split them out. But I would ask that maybe you remove it and not deny the dock, because then they wouldn't be able to resubmit that for another 9 months.
Okay. With staff's input, I would say that I think that what the applicant is asking for is to sever the dock element of the application and to move forward on the building element. You would advise by city staff that's permissible and acceptable to them. And I think it's within your authority to do that.
All right,
I think that's a reasonable approach to it.
I would suggest a motion and a second and a vote by the board on that.
all right.
I would move to approve that.
I didn't hear you.
I would move to approve that. Do we need something?
Is this the correct point in time to make that motion, or should we hear from the people with party status first?
The application belongs to the applicant,
Okay,
right? And he's telling you that he wishes to move forward on a portion, but not the other portion.
all right.
If you've heard sufficient information from staff as to the building element versus the dock, then like I said, make a motion, have it seconded, and see if the board wishes to proceed that way.
It's just to proceed that way. It's not for the actual vote on the case though, right?
You're not voting on the case, you have
Right.
sufficient information to vote on the case, because you've got people with party status. that
Yeah,
haven't
that have
spoken
gotten
yet.
spoken.
From this point, though, we would ask the party status, the city, the applicant, limit their discussion and presentation only to elements concerning the building itself, on the understanding that the dock would proceed separately at a later date.
All right.
Just a quick question. Looking at the drawing, if the dock is rearranged, without going into any of that, just saying there may not be enough room to get access to the dock with the pool and everything again there. So I'm a little bit concerned that if we approve the building as it stands, then it's, well, now we can't do the dock the way we talked about because now the building's there. I'm just looking, I don't know how you get to the dock, so if they can be separated, I'm all for it.
Yeah, actually, they can be handled that way, because, or the docks can be handled that way. If you look at the adjacent ones, you can do a walkway that runs along the seawall, and we can get with Ed on trying to work that out. We're not looking to do something that's strange. You'll look at some of the adjacent docks, and you'll see there's a walkway. You step off the seawall from a footpath, or a sidewalk, and you go walk along the seawall instead of coming out away from the seawall and then spreading out. And that's what created the end result that is not very well tolerated by the neighbors, and I understand their objections, although we had the code to comply to, and we had limitations to what we could do. But we'd much rather do something along the lines that the neighborhood would much better appreciate. And we'd be glad to consult with the adjacent neighbors and make sure that everybody's on the same page with what we're doing.
All right, is there a motion to separate consideration of the building portion of this application from the dock, and with the dock to proceed at a later time?
May I so move that we separate the two with the dock to proceed at a later time?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that's what we'll do. All right, at this point,
Does Mr. Bozak have anything else to add on the building element? I'm sorry. You have time left. You want to add any additional comments?
Yeah, I very little to say. The staff report's pretty extensively explains the content of the application. Basically, it is a 0.42 acre site, and what it really created this whole problem with the property as well is it's such a pie shape that it has such a narrow street availability, and it widens out to 190 feet on the water. And it was a very difficult building to design. Parking, as you can imagine, doesn't really curve, so it became very impractical. You know, and as big of a site it is, we could just barely get the parking that was required. We did, but it was a very difficult task. We did design consistent with the applicable CDC guidelines and with a comprehensive plan. So I feel like we really made an effort. The height is below the 50 foot. And we've made as I say, we've done this project 2 times before for different owners. And I feel like it's virtually the identical project, very close, not identical, but very close to what was approved 2 previous occasions. The problem that arose is this waterfront dock area, which, you know, I understand the concerns that were voiced, and I feel like that we comply with the regulations and the staff approval, our recommendation for approval. We would appreciate your consideration. I'm here to answer any other questions you may have.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think at this time we'll hear from the people with party status. I can call you in the order I wrote the names down, or you can just decide among yourselves what order you're going to present. Otherwise, Mr. Wink, if you would come forward and go first.
Mr. Board Attorney, will the people granted party status be speaking specifically just to the building on these comments right now, or would they be able to testify to the dock as well?
I'm not going to tell the folks at party status what to talk about. You certainly can if you desire. I'm not going to do
No,
that.
I'm not going to.
I would suggest to them that they are probably, I don't want to say wasting their time, but the matter of the dock is no longer before the board. It's going to come before the board at a different time, which I presume they'll be noticed or be here to discuss. That said, the interest of efficiency, discuss the matter at hand, which is the building, but if you wish to discuss the dock, I don't think the board's going to stop you.
Okay, based on what Mr. Chesney said and what the architect seems to be willing to do, my presentation's pretty moot because it's centered on the dock itself. So I appreciate your time, and I just want to be assured that we will have an ability at a later date when the new dock is presented, that we will be able to comment on that.
I believe Mr. Chesney had indicated.
It would have to go through the usual notification processes that were used before. Those I don't think are going to change. So I know there were some folks who mentioned they were not noticed but should have been. The radius is not going to change anytime soon. Right. So I would suggest that they utilize whatever informational pipelines they used to get here today to be informed of this hearing for the dock.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you very much.
Ms. Cornu? All right. Ms. Goodman?
I'm sorry, you have to speak at the,
Oh, I'm sorry. Pat.
The only thing that.
what is your name, please?
Marion Goodman.
Thank you.
In light of the comments about notice and the 200 feet that I heard, and it's a little hard to follow some of this, but I think that I realize there's things that are consistent everywhere, but I do think that there's a lot of folks here that were here in 2013, and myself included, and none of us remember even hearing about this dock. I assure you, as you've seen today, if that were the case, you would have seen this and you would have gone through the same thing, I feel like, back in 2013. So all I would do is ask if there's a way in this situation where we are all sharing a common waterway, and a waterway that's becoming much more busy, as Mr. Chesney and I spoke, that you all think about whether or not you can provide notices, because I think a lot of people really felt like it was going behind their back, and none of us want that. And I'm sure everything's been followed as it should, but a lot of folks, again, myself included, in 2013, I've owned that property since it was brand new. We never saw a notice. So, although your list says we did, but we never saw a notice. So, I don't know. Just for your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephanie Dawson.
Once again, I was primarily going to discuss the dock, so that point is mute. I will request that maybe because we were granted party status, that we get notification. You have our addresses. I found out because I walked my dog. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. And I did have neighbors tell me, but we are within 200 feet, I would think, across the water. So as the bird flies, we should maybe be noticed. So thank you.
Paul Gotchis.
Madam Chairperson and Board, thank you for giving us the opportunity to stand before you today. I was here for the dock design, and obviously that has been addressed, where they're going to be doing redesign, and we will see you at a later date then. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Pfiffner. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
That's correct. I'm surprised. I just wanted to say that I too was here to voice objections to the size of the dock and the configuration, and appreciate this gentleman's concern for the neighbors, and just want to make sure that everyone in the cove is notified of the next meeting. Thank you.
And I think that would be a city issue. That's not something this board has
Yeah,
anything to
it
do
would.
with.
If the city is going to go beyond its code and providing notice of the next hearing, that's its option, but there's no requirement in the code that it do that.
All right. All right, Keith Isaac.
So I'm, once again, Keith Isaac. I live at 231 Skiff Point, right next to it on the water. We've been lucky enough to have that lot with the view, and it's nice. We always knew somebody was going to build at one point or another, which is perfectly fine. We welcome somebody in. The only issue I had was, I don't know if it's an issue, but 231 and 241 had a HOA meeting for our internal stuff, and we were contacted by the developer owner to come and meet. So we said, once we're done, you can come in, that's fine. So they came in, talked to us and everything, and what we were told was that there were, like for the building, there were no variances, we're not asking for any. So that's the way we went on our business. And then finding out that there are asking for variances. So it was a little confusing on it for us when we were told one thing and then the meeting and there are variances. So that's one point. And the other thing is, where we live on the street, there's not much parking at all. The whole circle is a fire lane, you can't park there. And like I said before, we understand supplies have to be brought in, but when these big trucks are coming in, they're blocking the roadway for people to get out, like on the end of the road, 200 Skiff Point, 231, all the cars trying to get out. I just hope that they're reasonable and not taking up most of the roadway to deliver everything to this lot. So that's all I have right now.
Anybody have any questions for this gentleman? Could you just tell the board which areas of flexibility you're talking about? We don't use the term variance, but...
Just the sides. It looked good from the picture with the fence and everything. It was just, you get a little nervous in meetings when somebody tells you one thing and yes, this is what's going to happen, and then something is totally different when it comes up on paper. So it was more the side variant, the side lots, closer, because our property line is inches from the sidewalk.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Mr. Taggart.
Well, I'm Wes Taggart, Madam Chairman of the Board, but I was here to speak directly to the docs, so when that comes up again, I'll be back. Thank you.
All right.
Did Audrey Cornu speak again?
You can come forward and just make us,
Yeah, Audrey.
identify yourself again and make a statement.
Audrey Cornu, and mine was also something to do with the dock, so we'll wait and we'll see what the developer does, and hopefully he'll work with us and we'll get it right this time. And if you've ever seen me drive a jet ski, you're going to realize we need a lot of waterway there. Lots of waterway, so y'all keep that thing open for us, okay?
All right, at this time, our process calls for cross-examination of witnesses by planning and development staff. Anything? All right. And then cross-examination of witnesses by the applicant.
I would just say that I would appreciate if you forward us the names of the people who did object that were not within the 200-foot across the waterway. And for example, I'd be glad to at least contact them and present to them what we're proposing in an effort to try and minimize the conflict over something that we're trying to resolve.
I
Okay.
believe that would fall to planning staff.
Yeah, if the applicant wishes to contact those folks on his own, he's certainly welcome to do that, so long as they consent to it.
All right.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, our staff has stepped outside for a moment, so I don't think they want to cross-examine, but I want to check with them
Absolutely.
when they come back.
All right. Those of you with party status, do you have any questions? Everyone seemed to indicate that you were here to talk about the dock. I don't want to hold anybody back if anybody wants to ask planning staff or the applicant any questions. All right. Are there members of the public who do not have party status who would like to come forward and address anything related to this application? All right.
I'm Bill Johnson, as I was before. This particular property and this particular zoning category is very unusual in that it's medium-high density residential. So it has both the density allowance of high density and of medium density residential. So it's kind of puts in there that you can get more stuff into the 5-pound sugar bag. And it's a problem with, as I understand it, with not having the code updated to reflect the change in the countywide plans. So you end up having these huge buildings on really fairly small lots in that area without the normal separation and the openness to seeing the water. It's probably not an issue for this board to say no, but it should be an issue for the council to look at to see is this really the right type of criteria for this area. If you go out there and look at, and I've been surprised that you haven't been showing pictures of the area, the adjoining property, because if you're going to allow some of this flexibility for going up to the higher heights, you really should be looking at the character of the neighborhood and what's going to be happening to that in the future. There's a large, well-developed townhouse complex right across the street that's not nearly as tall as what's being proposed here. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to make a comment? Right. Closing remarks by planning staff?
First, just as a point of fact, the side setbacks are not a subject of flexibility. Minimum development standards in the MHDR zoning district do require for attached dwellings 10-foot side setback, and 10-foot side setbacks are being proposed. So the side setbacks are not part of the flexibility. It's really front setback to building height and rear setback to pool and patio. What I propose doing is adding a condition or a proposed condition of approval. I'll wordsmith it later, but it would be a general condition of approval that specifies that the dock as portrayed on the approved site plans is not a component of this approval. I'm also going to remove references, I believe I'll probably remove reference to the dock component in the development order, just to make it clear. I don't want, 5 years from now, for there to be confusion as to why there was a dock approved here and then a second dock approved. So I'd like to clarify that the dock is not a component of this, and I'd like to kind of memorialize that as a general condition of approval. And with that said, just to clarify, what the applicant will need to do is to add the dock component back in, as hopefully redesigned to satisfy the desires of the neighborhood as well as the needs of the use. They will need to go back through this whole process, and they'll submit an amendment to this development or this flexible development application. So it'll be the same number but with an A after it. It will go back to the Development Review Committee. It will get noticed at the very minimum at 200 feet. The sign will be posted on the property, and it will have to come back to this board. I just wanted to make that real clear in case anyone was still a little shaky on exactly how it's going to proceed, but that's about it. So with that said, that would be my request, is to add a condition specifically eliminating the dock component from the proposal. All right?
It would come back in as an amendment.
Correct.
I agree with that. That would need to be done as part of the motion made by the motioning board member. I would also suggest along with that motion that any findings of fact or conclusions of law set forth in the staff report specifically not be adopted by that motion relative to the dock. So what you'd be...
If we do that, the applicant mentioned a couple of times that they would like to continue proceeding forward with the building. If we made an approval and we left this case number open, would the applicant have the ability to do that?
Were you all anticipating a new application number, or would this proceed into the same one?
When they add the dock component, just procedurally, because it'll be a formal amendment to a flexible development application that's already been approved, it'll come through with the same number but with the letter A at the end of it. So it will be a total, yes, it will be a separate application. They'll have to file a separate application fee, but just simply from the way that we track it, we acknowledge that it's an amendment to this, rather than a brand new, totally different submittal, or that it expired as the other two did, or with the previous application on East Shore, the hotel. Well, it was approved as attached dwellings, and then they came back in later to do a hotel, but that wasn't really an amendment. That was a brand new project from the ground up. This will be merely amending their site plan to include a differently designed dock.
But if my question is, if we approve the building portion, for just a quick description, and add the condition to move the dock application forward at another time, will the applicant be able to proceed forward with, because the application calls for a 1-year development window unless it's extended, and my question is, would the applicant be able to proceed forward with permits and other site development activities when he's ready?
Sure, yeah. What I'd say is I'd probably write the condition to be more that the dock component is simply removed, flat out. I don't want to make it a condition that they must move forward with a dock. What if he decides, you know what, we don't need a dock, we don't want to do a dock, just forget the dock thing altogether? So I don't want to write something that was kind of, like if they don't apply for a dock now, suddenly they're kind of in violation of a condition. I want to make the condition just sort of that it just flat out eliminates the dock component, and that's that. As far as staff is concerned, there's no dock approved. It's memorialized as a condition in the development order. And I'll remove the findings of fact. Really, I'll remove the findings of fact that references a dock. I'll take those out of the development order.
Okay, I have a quick question. So if the developer were to obtain a building permit, could they go ahead and move forward on their building permit at the same time as processing an amendment?
Sure, I think they're mutually exclusive.
Okay, so you could do both at the same time, so it wouldn't inhibit any development of the building? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any closing comments by the applicant? All right. Any of the people with party status wish to make any further comments? All right. With that, we're going to close the hearing on this item, discussion, and vote by the board.
I think that was a good compromise by the applicant to go back to the drawing board, so
That's good.
hopefully they can work something out.
You know, ideally, we would all like everyone to leave our meetings happy, so it's not always possible.
That's a first for me here.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have comments? Or can we have a motion that incorporates the condition that Mr. Perry just described, is eliminating the dock component of this application from the request for approval today?
I'll take a shot at it.
Thank you.
Move to approve case number, make sure I got the right one here. Yeah. Case number FLD 2021-04010, based on the evidence and testimony presented in the application, the staff report, and at today's hearing, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with the conditions of approval as listed, and with the additional condition that all references to the dock are omitted from this application, and that any findings of fact or conclusions of law are also omitted from this application.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, with those conditions indicated by Mr. Baer, we approve this item. I think the next item on our agenda is from planning staff. The Clearwater 2045 Comprehensive Plan Update.
All right. We are going to have a presentation for our Clearwater 2040. Oh, wait a minute.
I think they're almost out.
All right. We have a presentation for you today by our consultants. So this is one of those fun times where you guys get to look at the big picture and actually do something other than site plans. So before we get started, we need to load a presentation, and then Kyle Brotherton from our staff is going to introduce our consultant, okay?
Thank you. Kyle Brotherton, Planning and Development. Here to introduce our comprehensive plan update. So as you may or may not be aware, the city has actually started to update its comprehensive plan, which is the guiding document of the city. Our current comprehensive plan was adopted in 2008. and it has been amended a handful of times over the years, with our most recent being in 2017. Our current project is Clearwater 2045, as you can see, and really with this plan, really aiming to plan out for the next 20 to 25 years for the city. So as Gina did mention, we've contracted with HDR and SB Friedman Development Advisors to assist in achieving this update. So there's been a lot of changes to the statutes over the years, and really those changes have allowed local governments to take back really control of their comprehensive plans and allow to plan what fits the city the best. And with that, in the old rules, there is a lot of redundancy built in, so this update aims to not only modernize our comprehensive plan into the future, we're also going to remove those redundancies. And with that, we hope that, everyone's going to be able to use this, and that it's going to be, a more meaningful document to everyone, not just city staff, but also our elected officials and our residents as well. So this project is, vitally important to the city, as it does set forth goals, objectives, and policies that will guide future development, redevelopment, and capital spending within the city. This is about a 2-year project, and we're currently about halfway through, and we're anticipating completion in fall of 2022. And so the following presentation is about 30 minutes, but it really does set forth the foundation and for updating these goals, objectives, and policies. And the presentation will detail what we've learned through data and analysis and our community engagement that we've had. And we've had a pretty good deal of community engagement through online Zoom sessions earlier this year in May and June. We've also had a number of in-person sessions as well in July. There were also listening sessions conducted by HDR. And we've also had a questionnaire on our city website, or the project website, I should say, clearwater2045.com. So after the presentation, we'll be seeking some feedback on the preliminary vision and framework of the plan. And I'd like to introduce Steve Shoecraft with HDR, who will be presenting this presentation for you. Steve?
Would you repeat your name, please?
It's Steve Shoecraft. It's SCHUKRAFT with HDR. I need to do one quick thing to get my notes up, and then we can start. So if you give me 1 second. What I have to do is run it in 2 ways on my laptop so I can see my notes, and on the screen so you can see the presentation. So that's what I'm getting set up. So this is intended to be, and how are we for time? Okay, good. This is taking you at a very different scale of thinking about the future of the city. So rather than individual parcels of projects, this is thinking about the whole city and thinking about the future over the next 25 years. So the comp plan sets forth those larger scale, bigger picture direction for the city to guide this level of decision making. So what the plan needs to be is a tool that you can use to reference as you make these finer grained decisions about individual properties and how those small scale pieces fit together to build the city that you want. Presentations organized. Okay, I can do this way. Presentations organized in quick 6 parts. A lot of the focus will be on the what we've learned through our early outreach and engagement activities, and what we're starting to think about in structuring the plan. So how we make the plan accessible and useful for people as they think about the future of their part of the neighborhood, and you think about how you apply city policy and regulations to guide development. So the process itself is relatively straightforward. As Kyle alluded to, the plan sets the large-scale direction for the future of the city, to look for balancing growth and development and to provide guidance for your decision-making. It addresses a broad range of topics that are included in the plan and build on a lot of the planning work that you have underway or will have underway in the next couple months. And we'll talk a bit about that in a second. And it identifies current and anticipated demand for public services and capital investments. It's a 5-phase process. We've started this process up back in the spring. We're in the midst of the data, or wrapping up data and analysis, which is our background research about existing conditions. We've had a series of listening sessions and community conversations to learn what the community's interests are about the future. And we're starting to move into the plan drafting stage, which pulls those together in the individual elements or chapters of the plan, and then we move into the refinement and adoption stage. As I mentioned, there's a lot of work that's either recently completed or underway that'll influence the plan, and the plan will influence these reports and documents. So these two pieces kind of go together. Greenprint 2.0 provides the basis for the sustainability and resiliency recommendations that we'll develop through the planning process. And then there's other efforts that provide various levels of detail and focus that will work with those teams putting those documents together to inform the plan as we develop the comp plan. So those include the strategic planning process, which is council level, 5-year planning, sort of guiding what they focus on in the shorter term. The Parks and Rec Master Plan, thinking about parks and open space and how that program develops over time. Utilities master planning to understand capacity and where that, and differential in capacity across the full footprint of the city. Housing planning work that's been underway, both your local housing program, community development program, but also work you're doing with Pinellas County and Forward Pinellas on the countywide plan, the housing compact. The economic development strategic plan is going to kick off in the next few months, so that'll provide additional guidance focused on how you build the economy and how do you attract the appropriate kinds of investment and types of investment in the right places. And then 2 projects in the transportation-focused area, the vehicular transportation mobility assessment, looking at capacity and traffic operations across the full city, and then a safety assessment, looking at those hotspots where you've got issues with either bike ped crashes or you've got vehicular crashes and trying to address those specifically. So we'll get to the outreach and engagement. There's been a lot of work done over the last several months to bring the community's voices to the table. So to kick off the process, the city and the consultant team have held a series of sessions, listening sessions, community conversations, and work sessions to get feedback on what people like about the city, what they're concerned about, and what they'd like to see in the future. And this process will continue into next year, so we'll go into a plan development effort over the next several months, and then we'll start to bring elements of the plan to the community to get feedback as we start to pull the pieces together and have that organized in the plan chapters or plan elements. And then that'll move into a more formal adoption cycle. So we'll be back in front of you when we have the plan drafted and it's been reviewed by the community, and then you'll review and make a recommendation to council for final action. So through the events that we've held to date, so online outreach and in-person outreach, we've engaged over 300 residents, students, business owners, and community leaders in conversations about the future of the county. So we had 31 community leaders in a series of listening sessions with our team. 20 people participated in online conversations, 200 people in in-person community conversations, and over 150 people responded to the web survey. So given sort of the continuation of the pandemic, we believe that that's a really good response to the activity, and staff did multiple sessions and really aggressive outreach to make sure people understood those opportunities and were sort of pressed to participate. So we looked at not just the total numbers, but also who was coming and what sort of interest they represented. And we wanted to be careful that we were getting a balanced set of voices to the table. And we feel like staff especially took the bulk of that work under their belt and did a great job getting people out. So what we heard, and it was interesting because you know, as the background, you've got the city's new tagline, or relatively new tagline. People talked about the beach and they talked about natural beauty when we asked them a general question about what makes Clearwater unique. They talked about parks and natural areas and natural systems, about the diversity of people and places within the city, about the locational advantages of the city's location in the region, They talked about community, they talked about character, and they talked about neighborliness. And it was interesting, as a relatively mid to large size city in the Tampa Bay region, they talked about the small town feel. So sort of understanding the dynamic of what people value in the city is a good starting point for us to think about the plan and how we communicate the plan. A specific bit of outreach we did was, or staff did, was with students from across the city. So a youth engagement exercise through 4 different community conversations, and that engaging 50 students in a discussion about what's missing in the city, what they want to see to make them stay, and what the future is Clearwater. They offered a lot of interesting ideas, and one of the things that struck us was the specificity of their comments. They were very concrete and very detailed. We want a skate park, indoor sports opportunities, more recycling, more art. They didn't talk about in generalities. They were very, very concrete. People talked about what would help them want to stay here. So, it's important consideration about what the future generation wants to see in the city. They talked about access to nature. They talked specifically about opportunities to bike and walk to destinations. Everyone across the board talked about the beach. Access to the beach, concerns about access to the beach, the future of the beach, how it's evolved over time. And that was reinforced in the youth conversations. They talked about some interesting challenges about diversity, about inclusion, about equity, and about opportunity. Specifically, if I live here, can I afford to live here, and can I find a job that's going to support my lifestyle in the city? And so those were a really interesting takeaway from the youth groups, and they're reinforced by the feedback we received from the community at large. On the website, we asked 5 key questions. So we asked for takeaways about improvements, concerns, what folks would like to see in the city. The future of downtown was discussed a lot. And it was interesting to see that was a continuing theme. People value downtown, but are a bit concerned about its future. That the pace of improvement may not have been as fast as they would have liked to see over the last 5 to 10 to 20 years, and they're concerned about what happens down the road. People talked a lot about transportation, getting around by car, but also getting around by bike, by walking, and by transit, and that those pieces need to come together for the future of the city. People talked a lot about parks, public spaces, beach and bayfront access, culture and the arts, and ways to bring the community together through events and activities. And then on some specific levels, they talked about housing affordability, about homelessness, and about the concern about the visibility of homelessness and how that's cranked up over the last several years. And those are things that all things that start to shape our focus as we start to develop the plan, and as we start to tie what we've heard from the community to what we've researched in our work so far. So to get to some specific comments, what people love about the city, and this is great. Tell us one thing you love about the city, and people gave us the list of 5 or 6 combined into a pretty carefully crafted paragraph. But this one we really liked. If I had to pick one thing, it's natural beauty in an urban setting. And then they talked about the city being clean, full of life, full of nature, refreshing weather, friendly people, community assets, parks and recreation centers. It's paradise. I mean, this is what you would like people to see, imagine for the future of Clearwater, and what you'd like to achieve for the future of Clearwater. Concerns, and this was a theme that we heard through different settings, was a sense of either emerging or concerns about the potential emergence of divisions between different perspectives shaping the future of the city. So between business and neighbors, between city officials and community members, that there was a strong consensus that people need to come together and engage in productive dialogue about your future. Set aside some of the silos that people tend to sit in and think more broadly about how folks come together. Improvement, these were common themes, again, affordable housing, reliable transportation, including public transportation options, improving access to the beach, concern about the beach's availability to locals was quite common, that people feel like, well, when it's busy, I don't want to sit in that traffic, I don't want to pay for that parking, I want to have access to my beach because I live here. So there was some tension about the sort of beach's growth over time and the locals' access to that resource. I always get confused with the question. So I'd like to tell you this about the city. So we asked, what additional things would people like to share? So people talked about diversity, but people in the region may not understand the city because all they do is see the city as a place to pass through to get to the beach or to get to downtown or another destination. So that the city's identity broadly was discussed and how sometimes that's lost, the identity of the full extent of the city is lost to people, that they don't understand when they're in Clearwater, when they're in a neighboring city. And it's that placemaking and place identity is sometimes confusing. So what we did was start to put what we learned through those listening sessions together with what we learned through our research to try to come up with a distillation of the existing things that are starting to shape the future of the city. So, as we prepared our working papers on land use and development, housing affordability, mobility, sustainability, and resilience, we brought that together with what we've learned from the community and started to think about some sort of key statements or observations about what's going to shape the future of Clearwater. So that this set of slides gets us into that discussion. So clearly, Clearwater enjoys a really unique setting and really strong locational advantages in the region. Between the beach and the bay, close access to jobs and other destinations across the region, easy access to 2 airports, and which sets the stage for long-term success, clearly. Population projections are relatively modest for the city itself, and what we're looking at is the planning area. So this is the full outline of the city in which the comp plan addresses, so it includes some of the unincorporated spaces within the broad outline of the city's planning area. So we're talking about the potential for 10,000 new residents in the next 25 years, but Clearwater is a largely built-out city and a largely built-out county. Only 4% of the city's land area is vacant. So imagine we need to think differently about how we accommodate that growth in the future. It's not going to happen on vacant land, and it's not going to happen in the midst of existing stable single-family neighborhoods. So we're trying to think about how we accommodate that level of change. And that level of change, if you think about it, 10,000 new residents translates into about 4,000 new housing units. So 4,000 housing units on 4% of the land is not going to work. So we need to be thinking about redevelopment, about intensification in appropriate locations, and then balancing that change, the redevelopment, retrofit, and infill, with the areas that we want to preserve and protect from a significant change. And that's really the tension in a built-out community, is you're going to see growth and you're going to need growth to support your tax base, to bring new activities, to bring new destinations to the city, to bring new, not just economic activity, but cultural life and vibrancy. But you're going to have to do that on a limited land area. And that's really the sort of bulk of the challenge when we think about future land use. Did I skip one? Oh, so let me pause on this one for a second. So this is the projection. You're in the planning area, about 135,000 people now. The regional projections call for you to go to 145,000 in 25 years. So again, not a lot of people, but also not a lot of room to accommodate those folks. So again, that's really the focus of the plan, is to think about how you grow in ways that protect what people value and improve the places that aren't performing as well as you think they could. So clearly downtown, in terms of this sort of set of observations, downtown is the historic heart of the city. It's an important economic hub, hub for entertainment and culture and arts and activity. So downtown's future has gotten a lot of attention in the last several years, and many of the tools required to promote its success are in place. So the redevelopment plan exists. The agency is working to spark vitality and activity across the full footprint of downtown. Imagine Clearwater is transforming the bayfront, creating a new local and regional destination. And the new form-based code provisions are in place to guide development. So downtown has a lot of the tools. It's more about how you manage and how you refine what's in place now to guide the future. Clearwater Beach, also an amazing destination, but faces challenges as its popularity increases. And I think we heard some of that tension, and you've heard that as you looked at development projects, is the framework is in place to guide development, but now you're managing the real details of how that framework gets delivered on individual properties and in individual locations across across the beach. Through the beach by design process, you've already made significant strides to guide investment in streets and streetscapes and public spaces. You've got the overall regulatory planning and regulatory framework in place to guide development. It's really about managing the future now. How do you manage impacts? How do you manage the push of people that are clogging up the roadway, that are making it difficult to get there, that are sort of changing the nature of activity that happens on the beach? So again, for us, it's really thinking about how you strike the appropriate balance between the development that's already on the books and what the limited amount that's still remaining to be delivered. The changing consumer behavior, the rise of e-commerce, decline in competitive position of older properties along commercial corridors are really key issues that we have to grapple with. So your older commercial corridors, I don't know the exact number, but maybe 90% of the development along your existing auto-oriented commercial corridors is 30 years old or older. So it's all due for some form of either reinvestment in the existing buildings or redevelopment. Those places are also the locations where you can attract the right sort of investment and think about repositioning. And we include this photograph of Countryside Mall because it's one of your largest commercial developments in the city. It's also likely to change dramatically in the next 25 years. Malls across the country are going dark, are seeing significant kinds of redevelopment. So how we shape that through policies in the plan and through regulations to implement the plan is really critical. And the mall is just one of a number of properties. You've got the whole range of auto-oriented commercial development that's going to go through some form of transformation in the next 25 years, and we see this as one of the real primary focuses of the plan. What becomes of those centers along 19, along Gulf to Bay, what happens to the corridors like Drew in the future is really critical to think about, because we have the potential to attract new investment and activity, to bring new services and destinations to serve the communities, but we have to be really careful about how we manage that. I think this is as a quick build on it, so you can see the layers stacking up as this slide goes on. But Clearwater is a city of very diverse and relatively stable neighborhoods. And we heard that across the board. We expected to hear people talk about concern about conditions within the older neighborhoods, that their maybe competitiveness was lagging, or that values weren't increasing as fast as the rest of the city, but that's really not your case right now. There's a lot of pressure, upward pressure on costs of housing across the whole city, from newer neighborhoods to older neighborhoods. And so affordability, when we think about the future of neighborhoods, is going to be one of our key concerns. And we have a sub-consultant that's helping us understand those pressures and think about the right tools to put in place to help protect the affordability that exists now and to deliver new affordable projects in the right places and the right configurations.
Can I ask a quick question? What is a stable neighborhood? What does that mean?
Good question. When we look at stability, we look at condition, we look at value. So we did look at like per square foot value for the single family neighborhoods across the city. And we didn't see a significant differential in value. We didn't see as broad of a difference as we might have expected. In some cases, you would see the older neighborhoods, which is the darker blue on this map, having a significantly lower per square foot value. So we see those values holding on fairly well. And we understand from the market research our sub-consultant did that your values are holding on at least as strong or better than other communities across Pinellas County. We have the benefit of our sub-consultant has done work for the county. They helped shape the guidelines for the Penny for Pinellas program for affordable housing. So they've done a lot of research to look at the housing market broadly across all of Pinellas County, and they've supported us on some work in other communities. So we didn't see significant pockets of decline or disinvestment or places that were even lagging in competitiveness. Houses go on the market, they're selling kind of at a similar rate across the board, across the city. When we talked briefly about mobility, and people talked a lot about that, we're going to need to think about new approaches to address limited roadway capacity, improve travel safety, and meet changing travel demand across the city. So as a built-out city, you don't have a lot of room for new highway capacity, roadway capacity. You have to manage what you have and get the most out of that space in the city. So if that's 30% of the land area of the city, which is a typical figure for built-out communities, that 30% is going to remain relatively stable as population increases and maybe as visitation increases. So how you get the most value out of that limited resource is really fundamental to how we think about transportation policy, how we look at transit, how we look at walking and biking as realistic alternatives to driving everywhere. So those are the things that we'll be focused on as we develop the plan. As the Parks and Recreation master plan is underway, we'll be working with them to understand what the city's opportunities are to improve existing parks and recreation facilities, both places and facilities, and thinking about potential expansions, connections between places, improving access to existing and potential new places, are all the things that we'll be looking at. And as part of that, we'll build on some of the recommendations about resiliency and about sustainability. So those pieces come together in this kind of parks, rec, and natural resource element as we think about how the existing places that you have, how those could be stitched together through improvements along some of the natural systems, and how we preserve the places that are most sensitive. So with that, we've the research that we've done, combined with the discussions that we've had with the community, we've started to think about the elements of a vision statement for the plan and the themes that we would incorporate in that. So what comes to the top of that list is livable neighborhoods, that people have talked most about how they value their existing communities, how they value neighborhoods across the city. And we need to think carefully about how we protect and improve livability within the city's neighborhoods. There was a lot of discussion, and this is a cross-cutting theme, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we see that in two dimensions. One is in the planning process, how we bring the full range of voices of the community into this process and understand their issues and ideas and concerns, but also how the city's long-term investment strategies and how their planning strategies help improve conditions across the board. Through previous work and through the plan, we'll be thinking about sustainability, resiliency, and natural beauty, both how that affects land use, transportation, and investment, capital investments in those places. The economic, social, and cultural vibrancy, that those pieces really come together, that we can't think about economic development without thinking about culture and arts and the liveliness of destinations across the city. A connected and accessible city, so not just getting around, but how we get from place to place, how to make those connections more safe, more convenient, more easy. And then again, about sort of how we plan and how we implement the plan is about cooperation and responsiveness. So building that, either if there's perceived bridge gaps between the city and stakeholders in neighborhoods or the business community, how we bring those pieces together in the plan as we develop the plan and as we implement the plan. So the framework for the plan, this is a quick set of slides about thinking about the physical dimensions of the city and how we start to organize the plan around those places. So the framework, the plan framework, provides a foundation for updating policies and strategies impacting different places across the city. A place-based approach is designed to address future development character and design quality of different places, and also provide a bridge for people to understand how to work their way through the plan. So if they're concerned about a specific location, they can start with the framework, and then they can work their way into specific policies and strategies that influence the future of a specific place. So this set of slides starts with the neighborhoods, thinking about protection, stability, livability, affordability, diversity over time in the different kinds of neighborhoods that exist in the city. Older, more urban neighborhoods, newer, more suburban neighborhoods, have different kinds of issues, some things in common and some things quite different in thinking about their future. So we're trying to look at how we have policies and strategies for different kinds of neighborhoods across the whole city. The primary economic engines in the city, the beach and downtown, that's where your most of your tax revenue is generated. It's what supports what you're trying to do citywide. To think about how we manage those programs in the future. Again, I don't think we're starting from scratch with planning for the beach or planning for downtown. A lot of work has been done, but it's really how we improve and build on what's been successful in the past. The mixed-use centers and corridors along 19, along Fort Harrison, these are places where we have probably the most potential to attract new investment. We're going to see pressure to change land use in a lot of locations. There's a lot of new pressure for housing along these corridors, so how we manage what happens in the corridors and centers and how we deal with the relationship between those centers and the surrounding neighborhoods is really critical. So that transition and bridge condition between what's commercial or non-residential and what's residential is important to get right. And that gets us into some of the fine-grained discussions you have about how projects impact surrounding neighborhoods. Those corridors and centers that are throughout the city, similar kinds of things apply. We see that there's opportunities for mixed use, for some modest intensification in specific locations, but dealing with that in a way that addresses the interface with the neighborhood is really critical. We highlight the Hercules District as the city's traditional industrial district and a center for small-scale warehouse for sort of maker enterprises, small-scale businesses. It's a great place for places to get a foothold before they move to bigger real estate. There's some sort of entrepreneurial energy there we can think more about, and working with the economic development strategic plan to develop policies that make sense for the future of that district. And then the plan organization itself. So where this comes together with the framework is the chapters of the plan. We're looking at these being somewhat thematic in organization. Vibrant and livable would address land use housing. Sustainable and resilient would be our parks, recreation, natural areas, resiliency, coastal issues. Connected and accessible, fundamentally transportation and mobility. Fiscally responsible, that's the capital improvement program and how the plan shapes your investment planning for the future. And then collaborative engaged is the elements of the plan, maybe standalone, but maybe incorporated in the others, about how you go about planning, how you engage people in processes like this, how you communicate about development projects as they're working their way through the approval cycle. That'll be also addressed in the plan as we look at internal coordination, but also coordination with your neighbors at Pinellas County, neighboring jurisdictions, Forward Pinellas, and regional entities. So our next steps in the process, we're in the cycle now. We're going to take a similar briefing to City Council next month to bring them up to speed on where we stand with the planning process. We're moving into the finalization of the data and analysis reports, so they'll be available for your review, and we'll distribute those to you, Council, and we'll make those available on the project website. We'll move into drafting of the plan elements later in the fall through the spring of 2022. We'll have focused workshops about the different elements of the plan so people can dive a little deeper in specific topics. And then later in the spring of 2022 through the summer, we'll move into publish the draft plan, work through a refinement process, and then bring that to you all and Council for final approval. So that's the conclusion of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Should we field the questions?
Can you take questions? Can I hand these pictures to you? Ask you if you can show them on the overhead. And I won't be long, by the way. First of all, I thank them for sharing these I got these slides last night, and I appreciate getting them. And the fact that it shows you want to cooperate, that with cooperations here, you're looking for input, not just trying to run something through. But personally, I have real concerns. Yeah, I'll let you get that one up if you can. The first one, number one, is there a number one? Or number three, page
I
3?
think it's 4, 5.
This is 3.
6, 7. We have.
I think 3 is first.
Yeah, 3 would be first.
Okay.
Got to do these right, you know. I have concerns because this plan does not address sea level rise at all and the consequences. And by 2045, it's going to be in the middle of us. It's not something we can ignore. This is a report, this copy is a report from a specific report to the city published in 2016 called the Coastal Vulnerability Assessment under a contract with Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. And it lists, you see the places that are listed as hotspots for sea level rise across the city of Clearwater. And one of the major hotspots for sea level rise is one of our major industrial economic centers. And it's going to be starting to flood by that time. If I could go to the next page, the chart. This is from our own flood maps called the own flood maps of floodplains of Pinellas County, which see, as you can see, a 2-foot rise in mean sea levels as average, which is mean is close to average. It's not higher and lower. It's just duh. And that's what these numbers are.
Wait a second, I'm trying to get it.
Underwater.
They're all underwater already. I don't know.
I have I have focus. Let me see if I can pull this up.
What's that?
You know, I thought I had cataract surgery and it had gone away. This is much better.
I can do it here.
That's great, thank you. And this shows what we are saying ourselves is going to happen in between 2040, 2050. It could be as high as 2 feet of sea level rise. And by the way, everything I'm following is actually higher at the high end of all these things. I think everybody's reading those same reports that the Arctic is melting faster than everything. So these are medium, low levels. So you add 2 feet. And this is mean. So if there's a king tide, it's 3 foot higher. Now, personally, I live at 6 foot. And at a high tide, it's at my seawall. 2 feet more, and my whole yard is underwater. That means my lawn's gone, my tree has died like it did my avocado tree years ago. These things but they're going to happen. I mean, I'd love to ignore them, but we need to plan on some of these things. If you could turn the next one up here. This is from some maps from this is for 2070. Now this is 15 years after the end of this report. You might pull it up a bit because I don't want to make this confusing. You see the legend at the bottom? I mean, there's 3 levels of this. The low level, the medium level, and the high level. But if it's the high level, look, Clearwater Beach is underwater at mean high tide, not at high tide. And it's obvious that you might show the next one too, and this is what's going to happen in 2000. Okay? I mean, we need at some point want to think about this stuff because my concern is that we are doing a lot of planning on things that are going to be underwater or wasted. If you have a sewer manhole at sea level now, I know they're trying to raise them, but everything, the fire hydrant, everything's going to be underwater. We probably won't know this until in 2045 when a fire truck tries to get out there and save somebody on the beaches and they can't get through because of high water. And again, this is salt water. This is not fresh water like you see Iowa floods or something and they rush it off. When this stuff hits, it's corrosive. If you have a boat, you have aluminum that rusts in this stuff. So if it goes underwater, all those things that have been nice and high and dry, you don't brush them off with the hose. You got big problems. We're fortunate, by the way, and the last one is, I want to just show you, I'm almost done here, by the way. This is actual stuff. This is not make-believe. This is the actual tide gauge from USF in St. Pete. And the comments are, you notice it's actually going up faster at the end. It's not straight anymore. The report from 2019 calculated that it was 7.8-inch rise since 1950. It's going up. Again, my house was built in 1950. I know, it's right there. So I'd like to just add the comment that we're fortunate for the last 10 years, we've been in a lower part of what's called the 17-year high-low moon-earth cycle, moon-sun cycle of low and high tides. It takes them 17 years to do the math because everything has to align. So we've been in the low area. By 2035, they're going to start being higher tides quickly, and we're going to say, what happened? Well, you know now to what could be happening. By 1945, many areas of the beaches and low-lying areas in Clearwater will be flooded by salt water. During storms and any nearby hurricanes, the effects will cause much damage to the public and private facilities. We're going to pay that to be repaired by public expense at our expense. Of course, similar flooding will be occurring throughout the whole nation. We're not alone on this. So if we think we're going to run in and say, FEMA, will you come in and give us some money? Oh, the Potomac, every place, Miami is going to be first on this list by far. My point is that whether we address it or not, it's happening. It's obvious it'll be obvious when we're not able to we can't get out to the beaches anymore. And salt water also causes damage, like, not to raise fear, but Surfside Condo, it did not fail only because of salt water, but that was one of the things that are expected to be because the salt water corrodes the rebar. Even our bridges get eaten out by salt water, if you notice. It's really hard to, as the engineer, you know, you can't even protect steel from corrosion from salt water. And then we're going to have, at some point, we're going to have infrastructure damage, killed vegetation, and we're going to find out developers are going to quietly stop retreating from the beaches. It's going to be less valuable when they realize they can't get there. So simultaneously, people are going to go to higher ground. And I will point out that Clearwater is unique among the areas. We're on a ridge. You go down to Naples, you go up, you go over the highways, you go north. We're one of the few high spots in here. So we're going to be prime territory, which can be used and can be optimized for what we have, because the other ones, like St. Pete's, are going to be in trouble. But also we're going to have gentrification that occurs, and these things really mess up this plan, because if people are working and living out on Clearwater Beach, where do they get the workers from? They're at the high ground now, which is not so valuable. Well, that's where we're going to build the high stuff, and I think that these things should be incorporated in your plan now. We can't ignore them. If we do, we're playing a happy game, and it's not comfortable, because you're really telling people, maybe you ought not to build here right now, and that's not a politically good thing to say. I know that, but we have to sort of say it. And so my final comment is I hope that maybe the city will take a chance and convene a high-level, real good panel to look at what we're going to do in 25, 50, 75 years, because I doubt if I'll be here, but our kids and our grandchildren ought to be here, and I hope that we've planned ahead to do something like that. So, and by the way, I have links for all these comments I've made. These are not, I didn't draw them overnight. So that was my comments, and thank you very much if I didn't bore anybody here.
Thanks. I mean, as a quick, this doesn't answer the broad challenge, but specifically, the state still requires us to address parallel flood, and there's existing policies and strategies in the comp plan that address those, not as aggressively as you've suggested, or at that longer time scale. But the information's available for us as we start to think about the future land use conditions, and we do have used in the past the mapping that's been developed that looks at sea level rise and the potential challenges that creates for specific locations. And I would just reinforce a little bit that there is a lot of high ground in Clearwater. So those are the beaches are definitely low and vulnerable to long-term change. There's some pockets along some of the creeks and inlets that are low, but generally the places that we're talking about concentrating development along the existing commercial corridors along 19 are some of the higher ground available for that kind of investment.
Further questions from me? I think it's a good report. It's a great vision. A lot of challenges to work through.
I really appreciate the efforts you've made to get citizens involved in this process, because sometimes we see people who are objecting to a particular development, when in reality, this is the level where they should have been participating and had some voice in that, because by the time that a particular project gets to us, the zoning is established. We don't have a lot of room to wiggle. So it's great to see that you're at least making the effort to get the public involved.
Yeah, and I would take credit for that, but that's been primarily staff, not the consultancy. That's part of what they've taken on as the project.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on that. I was able to participate and see one of those. Staff did, and I think they've done it. I just urge to keep doing that for continuing through the process, because, you know, we need that. And I look forward to the next step and the next responses and seeing how the plan shapes. Yeah, good job.
Thanks.
Good.
All right, is that it?
Oh, thank you.
All right, well, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 3:27.